Okay, this is the 2 minute warning. 2 minute warning. It is Easter Sunday. We are live. We are live. Hang in there. We'll be there in about 2 minutes. Welcome to pile into the chat room now while we studio. Special Easter Sunday program tonight. Happy Easter, Tony. Good to see you out there. Okay. Everybody's streaming. Good. Everything's 5x5. And we bring this in about. So hang in there. We're still on break. Take it easy. It is Easter Sunday, and yes, we are live. I promise you're going to enjoy the program. Let's go ahead. I don't want to bring him in. About 30 seconds. Hang in there. Everybody has family over on Easter. It's okay. Huddle around computer and to tonight's program. A lot of good information. Yeah, everyone could be taking a nap. It's not Thanksgiving. We have a good crowd on Thanksgiving night, but Cherokee Drifter is there. Good to see you. It's Happy Resurrection Day. Okay, let's go ahead and bring.
Part of our infrastructure if workers are going to be able to go back to work. The idea is to provide incentives for childcare centers to be built where there are none, and also for employers to develop their own childcare systems.
Rouse on CBS's Face the Nation. One secret prison unit at the military Guantanamo Bay Detention Center has been closed. U.S. Southern Command says Camp 7 had fallen into disrepair and prisoners were moved to an adjacent unit. 40 prisoners remain at Guantanamo Bay. America is listening to Fox News.
Indeed is the job site that makes hiring as easy as 1,
This
2, 3.
is the Truth Frequency Radio Network. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
First hour, here we go. Greetings, Earth Explorers. Welcome to X Squared Radio. I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, coming to you live this Resurrection Day from a location east of the Appalachian Mountains. This is where the past meets the future, and here the results are always positive. Might go a little past your imagination, but have no fear. You will be safely traveling with us. As I said, it is Resurrection Day 2021. Might be a little bit sparse on the live listenership, but that's no problem. The archives are almost as good. We got a lot of information to go over, and I do have an Easter special tonight for you. I think we'll get into it at the top of the hour. But I just want to give a good chance for everybody to have an opportunity to listen to it. Danny, good to see you out there. Blue Otter, Mark, and Tony, welcome. All coming in on YouTube today. So there's a mystery drone that keeps buzzing the U.S. destroyers during exercises off the coast of California. This is kind of interesting because, range on these drones is, if it's a remote control, you have to be pretty close, like within a quarter mile or so to be able to fly it. But if you're flying a quarter of a mile and you're controlling a drone a quarter mile from a destroyer, you're in harm's way. New details have emerged of how mysterious drones harassed U.S. warships off California on multiple occasions back in 2019. This was not known then, or at least it wasn't public. The Navy has yet to determine where the drones came from, who was operating them, and why they buzzed around a group of U.S. destroyers. The incidents were first reported by documentary filmmaker Dave Beatty, with new details obtained by the news website The Drive. I'm going to leave the links in my notes, so if you want to do more research on this, you can. But the vessels involved were the destroyers, the USS Kidd, the USS Rafael Peralta, and the USS John Finn. They were engaged in a training exercise in a military area about 100 miles off Los Angeles in low visibility. Location tells us something immediately. These were not hobbyist quadcopters that happened to see some cool ships and flew over for a look. Something far more deliberate. At 10 p.m. on July 14th, lookouts on the USS Kidd spotted two drones, two of them, which they described in the log as unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, without providing details. 10 minutes later, the USS Rafael Peralta and USS John Finn made their own sightings. During this period, the ships were carrying out a form of radio silence with minimal communication, a common practice during exercises to make the ships difficult for electronic eavesdroppers to spot. The ship's logs noted that the drones followed the Kidd and at one point matched its speed and bearing, and with one drone hovering above the helicopter pad. That's very provocative. The encounter lasted 90 minutes, much longer than the endurance of these small drones, which typically have flights endurance of about, depending on how fast you're flying and how much climbing you're doing, between 15 minutes to 30 minutes. That's about it. 90 minutes is a long time. Now, the drones departed, and despite the destroyer's impressive array of sensors, which include radar, thermal imaging, electro-optical systems, which can see in the dark, by the way, and devices which can detect and locate radio transmitters, guess what? They were not able to determine where they went or where they were being controlled from. A similar event occurred on the following night, the very next night, in the same location, starting at around 10 p.m. Let's see if I double check that there. Yes, 10 p.m. On this occasion, the warships contacted the nearby cruise liner Carnival Imagination, which confirmed that the drones were not theirs. Nobody on that ship was flying a drone, and that they could see 5 or 6 drones flying around the Navy vessels on their radar. This time, the encounter lasted 3 hours. 3 hours, with the USS Rafael Peralta identifying 4 drones shadowing them at one point. Now, the reason this story is so interesting is this is well outside the performance of any kind of recreational drone. In fact, I don't know of any drone that size that can carry a battery big enough to be able to fly at that speed, 20 or 30 knots, out at sea, 100 miles from the nearest land. No cabin cruisers out there, no rafts out there, no hot air balloons floating around, flying drones thinking, ha, this will be so funny. We'll fly around these destroyers and make them jump at their own shadow. Similar incidents occurred on the 25th and the 30th of July, and there have been others. But these were the only ones turned up by the Drive, that's this news organization, Freedom of Information Act, trawl. Now, a formal investigation followed involving the Navy, the Coast Guard, the FBI, and other agencies. Investigators contacted the operators of several commercial ships in the area, as these were seen as the most likely source of the drones, but everybody said no. Everybody drew a blank. Many suspected that the drones must have originated from another unit in the U.S. Navy. The U.S. Navy's Fleet Area Control and Surveillance Facility, based in San Diego, which is responsible for drone operations, but that was 100 miles away. They said the drones weren't theirs either. They may have come from another element of the military, but whoever it was is not coming forward. And they made no attempts to try to shoot these things down. That's the peculiar thing. The incident is immediately reminiscent of the multiple incursions of drones over the U.S. nuclear facilities that were reported last year. Some 24 nuclear sites suffered 57 drone incursions from 2014 to 2019 during the Obama administration. In one of the more dramatic incidents in September of 2019, 5 or 6 drones flew over the Palo Verde nuclear power plant for nearly 90 minutes. Again, well beyond the performance of the average drone. I have friends that have drones. Some of them are quite expensive, like upwards of $1,000. We're not talking about, cheap drones. We're talking about major drones that can reach speeds of 80 or 90 miles an hour. They don't have the ability to stay in the air for 90 minutes. And they don't have the ability to fly that far away from the controller. Now, sometimes you can send them out, and once they get beyond controller range, they go into failsafe and they go into home position. So they don't go like wandering out at sea looking for interesting things. They immediately, once they get out of range, they go back to the last known position of the controlling frequency, and they will seek to land automatically. Now, as with the Navy incident, the drones were not single, but operated as part of a coordinated group. As with the Navy, these were larger craft with greater endurance than the consumer models, suggesting an operator with considerable resources. Once you get up to these drones that are 3, 4, 5 feet, you're talking upwards of $100,000. And as with Navy encounter, investigators failed to establish who flew the drones, where they were flown from, and most of all, why they were flown, and whether they were actually taking photographs or not. I think I'm with you, Alan. Alan says, I think it's anyone's right to destroy any unwanted drones that fly over one's property. That's going to get you in trouble. There have been people that have been arrested whipping out a shotgun and blasting a drone out of the sky that happens to fly over their property that's maybe filming their wife sunbathing by the pool. But the guy gets in trouble for discharge of a firearm and all that stuff. So, by the way, we have a listener out there on DLive. And Analza 11. Thank you from Kentucky up there. Good to see you up there. What is it? The Italian station says, "Can I get a hunya?" Okay. Hi. See you. Now, what we cannot do is assume that such encounters are trivial and that they can just be ignored. It seems likely the drones were gathering intelligence, possibly about the radio signatures of particular warships, but they might have more serious purpose. Simply flying around a warship, a drone can cause lots of problems. Not least of which by interfering with the helicopter operations, and a drone nearby with a jammer can cause far more disruption than a larger aircraft at a longer range, because jamming strength falls off with the square of the distance. So you only need a few watts to do it if you're just hanging outside the window. Small quadcopters have already been used extensively to drop bombs and incendiary devices in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, all over the place, Palestine. And even a small explosive charge is enough to knock out radar, communication antennas, or even kill people. It would also be a mistake to assume that current destroyer weapons can easily knock out drones. A 2020 USNI study highlights how small drones can mission kill a destroyer, not sinking it, but preventing it from carrying out its mission. Expect to read more about this story as the facts emerge, and we will try to keep you posted. But as for the present, it's all mysteries. All mysteries, all questions, no answers. Just to recap, tonight is Easter Sunday. We are live. I played with the idea of running an archive, but every year I do an Easter special, and mine are a little bit unique. If you've ever sat through one, you'll testify to that. If you haven't, don't leave, because I promise you'll never have heard this story this way before. And I thought maybe if you had heard it, that you would bring your friends and maybe spread it around and let them know that you heard it on this program, and that maybe it would be a good idea if they heard it as well, because it makes a big difference. It changes people. Big D 1955, good to see you out there as well. Space Lincoln Landrew, good to see you. Saw an ad for an electric Hummer. Yeah, that's old news. Somebody said, oh, somebody finally made an electric Hummer. I made an electric Hummer 10 years ago. Don't worry about it. It's old news. Anybody can make an electric Hummer. It won't go very far. It won't go very fast, but it can be done. No big deal. I've also made a Ford Ranger, and I've made Chinese trucks and Indian trucks, so don't be flipped out by the headline. Old news. Already did it. So let's talk a little bit about the EPA. The EPA actions are apparently leading companies and states back to the dark ages. Yeah. We thought we had the EPA under control when Trump became president. He took apart a lot of their power. A lot of people resigned. A lot of people bailed. A lot of the teeth were pulled out of the EPA bulldog, and business started to go back to usual. But hi, Dogstar. Good to see you out there on YouTube. With this new criminal organization that has taken over the agencies, departments, bureaus, and administrations, it's sort of like they want to make a name for themselves. Like, when Big Boss took over all the municipal operations with his crime gang and Dick Tracy, the very first thing they had to do was say, well, I tell you what, boys, this isn't business as usual. So it was a big shakedown. In a healthy scientific community, any healthy scientific community, dissenting voices and disagreements are often accepted, and they're even encouraged. That's what we do. We question. We ask, why are we doing it this way? Why have we always done it this way? Why do we always make this same mistake over and over again? We ask these kinds of questions. But under the Virtual Joe administration, you could be fired for asking questions. Yes, the new Biden-appointed administrator of the Environmental Protectionist Agency, Michael Regan, reportedly purged dozens of scientists and other experts put on key advisory boards under former President Donald Trump Wednesday of this week. Rather than in the shadows, as is the norm for these sorts of purges, Reagan happily told the AP about his reset in an interview with them. Ironically, the administrator said in the interview that his purge would return the EPA to its time-honored practice of relying on advice from a balanced group of experts. You know, experts in the art of protecting the corporations that make up the EPA. Reagan told the Associated Press, "Scientific integrity is a foundational value for EPA, and I am committing to ensuring that every single decision we make meets rigorous scientific standards," which is bullshit. Oh, sorry. Did I say bullshit? I didn't mean to say bullshit. I just slipped out. The administrator is reportedly attempting to restore public confidence in the EPA, and one would think this process would begin with not removing the opposition outright. Reagan, however, says to do that, we have to identify and root out any decisions from the past that were not properly aligned with science. According to the Associated Press, Reagan unceremoniously axed 40 members of the Science Advisory Board and the Clean Air Scientific Advisory Committee, which provide scientific expertise and recommendations for air quality standards and other policies intended to protect public health and the environment, like the water and the air and the land and the forests. Reagan seemingly had it out for these people. No seemingly about it. The administrator took office less than a month ago and already specified in a Wednesday media release that resetting these two scientific advisory committees will ensure the agency receives the best possible scientific insight to support our work to protect human health and the environment. Today, we return to a time-tested, fair, and transparent process for soliciting members to these critically important advisory bodies. Yeah. So you understand what's going on there, right? This is fascism at its best. The administrator couldn't even keep up bipartisan appearances. Reagan told the AP that we set the agenda here based on the president's vision, and we are charged with protecting the public health and the environment, not them. This purge is seemingly just part of a much larger White House-led investigation into Trump-era political interference in science across the government. Yes, I'm sure. Interfering with science. I see. The White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, that's right next door to the Deputy Chief Director of Paper Towels, tweeted on Monday. I thought we didn't like tweeting. Maybe this is okay. Tweeted on Monday about its new Scientific Integrity Task Force. Bullshit. Claiming it would deliver real results based on science, not politics, which basically means real results based on politics and not science. If Virtual Joe's display of bipartisanship thus far are representative of this task force's policy, I wouldn't be so sure that exactly the opposite is taking place. It's pure politics and has nothing to do with science. Some, rightfully, have pushed against this move. John Graham, who's a leader of the SAB, reportedly defended his board's work in a small email, saying it has exposed the scientific shortcomings of the Trump EPA's plans to weaken greenhouse gas standards for autos and remove numerous water bodies from the federal pollution protection, according to the AP. In other words, I'll try to decipher this for you. In other words, Mr. Reagan assumes this board can now, thanks to the removal of these experts, do the work it had already been doing throughout the Trump administration anyway. Graham was reportedly saddened by Reagan's radical action, and frankly, he's absolutely right to be. Regardless of the political affiliation of the board members, Reagan decided were either unnecessary or too politically charged because they're Trump supporters, to make science-backed decisions. These people were already fighting for the science integrity the administrator wants to see the return of. It's self-sabotage. And unfortunately, it's once again a case that will likely end up hurting the American people far worse than Biden's approval rating. Just so you know. Wow. Good size chat room here. Brandy, good to see you. I'm so glad she's down there outside of Dallas, Texas. And Mojo Palms 1 out there. Let's see who else. Overland Lad. Happy Easter to you, my friend. Yeah, well, there's more to the president's movement than meets the eye. We're going to talk a little bit about that when we get a little bit further into the program. Some space-based stuff. The Psyche mission, and that's what it's called. If you don't think people are paying attention to my latest book, Asteroid Mining: The Future of Energy, you are mistaken. Set to launch next year is the agency's Psyche spacecraft. Yeah. And it's going to explore a metal-rich asteroid in the main asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. A major component of NASA's Psyche spacecraft has been delivered to the agency's JPL in Southern California, where the phase known as Assembly, Test, and Launch Operations is now underway. Now, over the next year, the spacecraft will finish assembly and undergo rigorous checkout and testing before it's shipped to Cape Canaveral, Florida, for an August 2022 launch to the main asteroid belt. I find this very exciting. And the way that they develop these space programs, they're inspired to do so. There are lots and lots of asteroids out there, but they've identified this one. By metal rich, they mean gold, platinum, other precious metals. Some of these asteroids are worth trillions. They would, if brought back to Earth, would make gold one of the most common elements on the Earth, next to maybe copper. Just incredibly, incredibly wealthy. Reality Nonfiction 2, good to see you out there. Happy Resurrection Day to you, my friend. Yeah, I get that. The large box-shaped structure made a dramatic entrance as it rolled onto the white-walled clean room floor. My father used to build the clean rooms, so that's how I know. Of a JPL's storied High Bay 1 of the spacecraft assembly facility in Pasadena, California, not far from where I graduated high school. And it's, of course, kind of the centerpiece area of the Birth Trilogy, because I grew up there, so I have a lot of the details that went in the book. You birthers out there. Not birthers like birthers, but birthers like birthers, okay? Birthers, you know what I'm talking about. Some of the chassis' most visible features include the 6.5 foot wide high gain antenna frame that will hold the science instruments and bright red protective covers to safeguard delicate hardware. Of course, once this thing gets out there past Mars, between Mars and Jupiter, the asteroid belt is filled with hundreds of thousands of asteroids, some of them very large, like Ceres, and some very small, about the size of a suitcase. This one's going for one they've already identified. And let's read on a little bit. I don't know if they're going to latch onto it and take a sample of it and send back the information. Let's see. A major component of NASA's Psyche spacecraft has been delivered to the agency's JPL. Yes, got that part. Let's see. That story a little shorter. Okay. Seeing this big spacecraft chassis arrive from JPL from Maxar is among the most thrilling of the milestones we've experienced on what has already been a 10-year journey, said Arizona State University's Lindy Elkins Tanton, who as principal investigator leads the Psyche mission. Building this complex precision piece of engineering. Hold us, take a quick break. Hang on a moment here. Yes, we'll send TFR on its break, and then when they come back, we will be here. How many people? The phone lines are open there too, so I've got the phone lines posted. 213-233-3998 if you want to call in. So we are watching. Not many people in the chat room there at TFR, but it's Easter Sunday, so a lot of people are taking a break. Let's see. It's absolutely a triumph of human determination and excellence. Psyche's target is a metal-rich asteroid of the same name, which orbits the Sun in the main asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Scientists think that Psyche is largely iron and nickel and could be the core of an early planet. Exploring the asteroid Psyche, about 140 miles, it's actually 226 kilometers wide, could lend a valuable insight on how Earth and other planets formed. Over the next 12 months, the project team will be working against the clock to meet deadlines in the run-up to launch. You don't want to miss your launch engine. Engineers and technicians prepare to move the chassis. I think it's going to head out anytime now, in the next couple of weeks maybe. He said it's exciting watching it all come together, and it's part of the project's life cycle that I love the most, said Psyche project manager Henry Stone of JPL. But it's really intense. It's an intense phase as well. It's intricate choreography, and if one activity runs into a problem, it can impact the whole process. Staying on schedule at this phase of the mission is absolutely critical. The SCP chassis, which comes to JPL with most of the engineering hardware systems already integrated. The Maxar team built the entire structure and integrated the hardware needed for the high-power electrical system, the propulsion system, the thermal system, and the guidance and navigation system. I think this might even be using ion drive. Mistaken. Psyche mission will take advantage of Maxar's super-efficient electric propulsion system, right, ion drive, to push Psyche through deep space. Maxar will also deliver the large twin 5-panel solar arrays that provide the power for spacecraft systems. Delivering the SEP chassis, they said, we're proud of our team. We've managed to design and build an SCP aircraft for a 1 billion-mile journey through our low-power environment, all while prioritizing the health and safety of our team during a global pandemic, blah, blah, blah. We don't care about the pandemic. It's fake stuff anyway, isn't it? The assembly, test, and launch operations phase kicked off on March 16th when the engineers gathered in High Bay 1. The mission's 3 science instruments will arrive at JPL over the next few months. The magnetometer will investigate the asteroid's potential magnetic field. Second, we'll fire back in. Might be a little bit of intro music to enjoy.
No hate, no hype, no fear. We are TFR, your protection from deception.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. So the spacecraft has a magnetometer on it, which is going to investigate the asteroid's potential magnetic field. The multispectral imager will capture images of the surface. That should be very cool. And the spectrometer is going to analyze the neutrons and gamma rays coming from the surface to determine the elements that make up the asteroid. JPL is also providing a technology demonstration instrument that will test high data rate laser communications that could be used by future NASA missions. I think it's very cool to look at. I'll leave the pictures in my, I might put them in the newsletter. I don't know. Y'all want it in the newsletter too, or just keep it in my notes that you can access on the Sunday night programs? No, everyone didn't fall asleep. It's just, it's Resurrection Day, so everybody had the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off, probably over 8. I don't know of any games that are on. Do you? I'm not really sure. Just not many people out there thinking about listening to internet radio. But once a full spacecraft is assembled, the orbiter is going to move from the spacecraft assembly facility to JPL's large thermal vacuum chamber. This is a massive undertaking in itself. It's going to simulate the harsh environment of deep space. The chamber is where JPL engineers will begin the heavy-duty testing to ensure the entire machine can survive deep space, thrust with the electric propulsion system, and take scientific measurements and communicate with Earth. Now, by next spring, the fully assembled Psyche is going to be shipped to the Kennedy Space Center, August of 2022. And this spacecraft will fly by Mars for a gravity assist in May 2023. And in early 2026, will go into orbit around the asteroid, where it will spend 21 months gathering science data. It's pretty cool stuff. Pretty cool stuff. One more science story. Tonight is Easter Sunday, or what we call Resurrection Day. And typically what I do, not typically, but I have done for now, 17 years, on America Free Radio, X Squared Radio, is to give a special Easter message. And that's what I'm going to do tonight. So if you haven't heard one before on this program, then you need to stick around. If you have heard it before, tonight's is a little bit different. I don't make them the same every year. It's a matter of meditation and prayer, how these things go together, but I think you're going to enjoy it. I really do. I may cut it out or edit it out and make it its own Easter broadcast for the world. And also, you people that are listening on YouTube, YouTube's days are numbered. Not that YouTube is going to disappear, but YouTube is systematically purging programs like mine. They've already taken out most of my competitors, most of my colleagues. So it's only a matter of time before they take me out too. They don't like real science. They don't like clear and concise analysis. And they don't like you. So we have taken steps to make sure that all of the content on YouTube is now cloned and available on Odyssey. Yes, Odyssey. And if you go to my Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Gab, MeWe, Anon Up, WeGo, every social media that I can think of, I have listed my Odyssey address. So I will try to put it in the chat room at the bottom if I think about it before the end of the program. I'm definitely going to leave it in the description right here at the bottom. You can see, I can't reach down there because, see, the camera only goes so far, but right down here at the bottom is my Telegram address and also my Odyssey address. So if you want to look at these archives, if they get purged off of YouTube for some reason, they're all going to be on Odyssey. So everything is safe, okay? All this information, megabytes and megabytes and megabytes of truth, are all safe for you. One more science story. We're talking about the first helicopter on Mars. It's officially on Martian soil. NASA's Mars helicopter, which is called Ingenuity, it touched down on the surface of the red planet after being dropped by its mothership yesterday. Let's see. The helicopter's first flight is just over a week away. Its 293 million mile journey aboard NASA Persevere ended with the final drop of 4 inches from the rover's belly to the surface of Mars today. I know you can hear laughing in the background because my stupid cat opens the office door, comes in, wanders around like, hey, here I am, pet me, but he fails to close the office door behind him. So the office door is open, and you can hear a conversation going on in the rest of the house. NASA's excited about this helicopter, and I am too. If all goes well, Ingenuity will perform a series of ever longer flights over what's called Jezero Crater. Let's see. Each flight should reach no higher than 16 feet and will be conducted over a 300-foot-long flight range. NASA plans a series of tests before that first flight to fire up Ingenuity's 4 rotor blades. They spin at approximately 2,537 revs per minute. While Perseverance watches from a safe distance, the rover will be stationed a safe 16.5 feet away from the drone before the first flight. But of course, Ingenuity must survive the bitter cold of the first night alone on Mars. The helicopter's battery will power its heater enough to maintain a steady temperature of about 5 degrees Fahrenheit. The Ingenuity team will be anxiously waiting to hear from the helicopter the next day. Did it make it through the night? If the solar panels are working as expected, all that stuff. Mission team observers or members will closely watch Ingenuity's temperature and battery performance over the weekend to ensure the helicopter's healthy. If everything looks good, Ingenuity can then move on to its rotor tests and other system checks ahead of the first flight. A lot of people don't know this, but it is just part of NASA's ambitious Perseverance rover mission to explore an ancient delta in the Mars Jezero crater. The rover is expected to spend the next 2 years exploring the area to seek out signs of ancient life. Perseverance will also collect samples of Mars rocks to be collected and returned to Earth on a later mission. It just weighs about something like 4.5 pounds. It's not very heavy. I'm thinking it's got to weigh more. Batteries way more than that. Hang on a second. If I can find the information. No, I'm not exactly sure how much it weighs. Yeah, it's got to weigh more than that. It's got to weigh 30 or 40 pounds anyway, to have all that motor and all that battery and heater and 4 blades and yeah. We'll find out. How about that? I'll find out how much it weighs. All right. Now, something else is going on in the news, and you might have caught it. You might have missed it. But, of course, those of us that are waiting for the first baseball games, we're excited about this. But we're also saddened because of the sanctions that have been taken against Major League Baseball by the federal government. You know, it's just rare, so rare to see the federal government sanction states. We sanction other countries. We sanction Russia. We sanction China. We sanction, Iran or Afghanistan. But you don't sanction your own states. But that's exactly what's happening. Exactly what's happening. What is this? David Nino Rodriguez on YouTube just stated that BLM has shown up in Georgia open carrying AR-15 rifles. Well, that's nothing new, Mad Hat. Nothing new at all. The not messing around guys. They march around in uniform, open carrying, loaded. And I think one of the guys even got accidentally shot. He wasn't killed, but he was actually shot because one of the yahoos in the not messing around group ended up mishandling his weapon and shot somebody in their group. Yeah, it's nothing new here. Nothing new. Nothing to see. But there have been now Marxist sanctions against American states by our own government. In case you missed it, Virtual Joe has, for the very first time in American history, called for presidential economic sanctions of a member state because the citizens of that state dutifully and legally passed legislation requiring voters to have ID in order to receive a ballot. Yeah. This attacks the very core of our republic, and it violates the Constitution so directly that the state has no choice but to resist. These sanctions would be meaningless except that they economically attack people of color and the city of Atlanta to the tune of more than $190 million in a single fiscal year. This is what the U.S. would do against a foreign enemy, not against a state. The Marxist puppet, Virtual Joe, is ordering federal economic sanctions against the masters, which, by the way, are not going to move from Augusta, the Atlanta Braves, the Atlanta Falcons, and the Atlanta Hawks, along with the UGA and Georgia Tech football. They're doing everything they can do short of marching federal troops into Georgia to ensure cheat by mail is the only election system in America. They have used it twice in Georgia in less than 3 months, and it worked flawlessly both times. True, a few young staffers had to be assassinated who were about to go public about the criminal nature of Ballots R Us, the massive counterfeiting operation that creates bogus ballots needed by the Marxists to cancel out the vote of U.S. citizens. But that is a small price to pay for unmitigated victory, don't you think? It is now the internal policy of Virtual Joe to use the establishment party in Washington to sanction any legislation any state happens to sign into law. He has already made public his intent to punish the local population for what he personally decides are their errors. In order to avoid these sanctions, Virtual Joe is requiring state and local municipalities to seek approval by President Biden on legislation that they might be considering. Let that sink in for a second. The Democrat Party is no longer elected, as is also a large portion of the Republican Party, that are the remnants of the fascist establishment party originally established by FDR and codified by Jimmy Giveaway Panama Canal Carter. They are openly and unabashedly instructing, promoting, assisting, and condoning federal employees punishing their political opponents. Virtual Joe is deeply compromised by Ukrainian crime bosses and the communist government of China. He simply is not in a position to represent Americans anymore. The fascists in Washington need to stay in power and make sure that young allies are also appointed into office through the cheat by mail program that worked so well for them in 2018, and 2020, and 2021. In order for that program to continue, they must drive home their assertion that African Americans are not intelligent enough to get a driver's license or a photo ID so they can equally participate in American society. This includes voting and getting vaccinated if they so choose. The call for unity by Virtual Joe is nothing less than an extermination order issued for all Americans who oppose his dictatorship. When your time comes to stand up for your rights, what will you do? How about your neighbor's rights? Will you stand there and let your neighbor be tased and beaten at the local market for not wearing a mask? Will you defend your neighbor's right to vote and have his vote protected against a fraudulent ballot printed and counted to cancel his vote out? Will you put your mask on and bow your head and roll up your sleeve because you think Virtual Joe has your best interest at heart? Or because you just want to get on an airplane or go to a movie? What are you willing to live without? If Virtual Joe sanctions your way of life, a bus ticket, an Uber or Lyft, eating at a restaurant, a baseball game, a first date, a family reunion, church, when will you remember who you are and stand your ground for rights given to you by God? Are you a free people? It's time to say, not one more inch. I think you agree with me. In the chat room, anybody disagree with me in the chat room? Not one more inch. Not one more inch. What is it you said, Brandy? The claim is that the minorities cannot tell what number is your ID number. Oh, your driver's license number. Oh my gosh. Wow. Yes, we could barter. We could. That would be a little inconvenient, but are you willing to do it? Yes. Mark, I had hesitations also, but no longer. No more. No more hesitation. I stand with you, and I would stand in front of you and protect you. I would. Never liked bullies. Won't put up with it now. All right. Let's see here. How much time do we have in this segment? 8 minutes. I can get started on it. So I'm going to do that because I put this in the middle and I want it to be here instead of at the end. So this is what I'm going to do. I call this section. Okay, Kat, go close the door. Go close. No, don't. I didn't say go out. Cats cannot understand English. I call this section the night before eternity. You know, when you read the scriptures, it's sometimes hard to put all the timelines together because sometimes the stories jump around from Luke to John to Matthew to, sometimes Old Testament. You got to go back to Psalms or read something in Isaiah. Isaiah is quoted a lot and used by the Savior a lot. And so over the decades that I have taught from this book, I have sat and meditated or thought about in deep reflection about what the city of Jerusalem was like during Passover, what it was causing in the city among the people, and what the customs were, and what the sounds were and smells were. And if you get a chance, you should go there in your mind anyway, and just walk around the streets. They're narrow anyway, and a lot of the stuff is old and some of it is modern, and the people are different than they were then. It's more international than it was, but you can get the feel of it. You can get the smell of it. You could talk about the Savior's life for days, but I just want to talk about the last few days. In the hours leading up to the crucifixion, there was a lot going on, and the completion of the prophecies leading up to this grand event and terrible event, but a necessary event. And so what I've done is, at least tonight, I've taken the 7 what are called utterances, the 7 things that Jesus said from the cross, and tried to put them together for you in a perspective that will give you some value, allow you to maybe take a non-movie view of it and think about all the preparation that went into this, not just in Jesus' life, but centuries and centuries of of preparation and prophecy and communication between God and man. Of course, the events leading up to the crucifixion are a matter of storytelling, a matter of oral tradition, a matter of symbolism, and sometimes interpretation of reflections that were made way, way after the fact. And I suppose my reflections and revelation about it is as good as anyone else's. And so what I'm just going to try to do is share that with you. So the first thing that happened after, let's just pick it up at the Garden of Gethsemane. You remember that after the Last Supper, when Judas left and the 11 remaining apostles and Mary went up to the Garden of Gethsemane, and it was not that long of a walk. If you've been to Jerusalem and made this walk, it's not a terrifically long walk, but it is up a hill. It's quite a hike to get up that trail. You get up there, and the garden is not like what you would expect. It's more like a grove of trees, and these trees are very old, and they were old then. Olive trees, they're timeless. I think if you take care of them, they'll last forever. But the way the garden was laid out is there's a less dense outer area, and then, it gets more dense and more old as you get toward the inner part of the garden. And so in the outer part of the garden, Jesus asked 8 of the apostles to stand guard, just stay up and pray with him. And then Jesus took Peter, James, and John a little further into the garden with him. And then at some place deeper in the garden, he sets those 3 down and tells them, because now they have a greater charge, they have the Melchizedek priesthood, they've been to the Mount of Transfiguration, they've seen things and heard things the other apostles have not heard, sets them down and tells them to pray. And then he goes further on into the deeper part of the garden by himself. And as the story goes, while he is there in the garden, the sins of the world begin to be settled on him. The mission for which he was brought to the earth, for which he was uniquely qualified to do, begins to form up, begins to reach its conclusion. And so as the sins begin settled upon him, they're not painless. I mean, they're very painful. The pain is so great that it says great drops of blood oozed from his pores. Now, I don't know if you've ever felt pain like that before. I don't know personally anyone who has had blood come out of their pores because they hurt so bad. But that's something that most mortals can't take. And a couple of times he came out from the garden to wake up Peter, James, and John, who had fallen asleep, saying, look, guys, I've only asked you to do one thing. I know we've eaten a meal. We've walked up the hill. It's a spring night, and I know it's hard, but I need you to stay awake and pray with me for a while. And they fell asleep again. And then finally he just let them sleep and took the pain on himself. So even an angel showed up and tried to comfort him, and it was of no comfort. Now, I don't know about you, but if an angel showed up to comfort me, I would be very comforted. I would be very inspired, but it wasn't to be that night. So then, as they come out of the garden, wakes everybody up, and they march out to where the 8 are still stationed. A row of torches is coming up that nighttime pathway to their location, because Judas knows where they go at night after they leave the city, because they don't want to be chased down by guards or zealots or fans or whatever you want to call them. They wanted to be by themselves and pray, and they did this often enough that Judas knew where they were going to go. And Judas brings the Roman guards, and they approach the group. Now, of course, zealous Peter jumps forward with his sword. He's a fisherman, not a sword fighter. Swings at one of them and manages to whack off his ear. It's got to be a pretty sharp sword to whack the guy's ear off. Jesus tells him to put away his sword, ostensibly puts the guy's ear back on, and of course that guy is converted immediately, probably. And then Jesus says, "Whom seek ye?" And they said, "Well, we seek Jesus of Nazareth," and in which case Judas came forth, kissed him on the side of the cheek, and that was the identifier. This is the guy that you're supposed to arrest. Now, there are a lot of versions about what happens in here, and the most important part is the part that people miss. Yes, there's a lot of, hey, Judas, dost thou betray me with a kiss, all of that stuff that you saw in the movies. But what you didn't see, let's take a quick break. Hang on a second. We'll bring TFR back in. We'll bring TFR back in 3 minutes. I'm going to just hold where we are in the story because I don't want any of the TFR people to miss this part of the story. But a lot of people miss this part where the guards are there, they're armed, and that's the one thing you don't want to do is mess with the Roman guard, because if you hurt one, then 4 show up, and if you hurt those 4, 40 show up, and you hurt those 40, 100 show up. That's why they're called centurions. And the reason that there are only 100 is because the Romans are so vindictive if one of their soldiers is hurt. It only takes 100. It only takes 100 to control the entire city, because no one's going to touch a Roman guard, no matter what. But interesting thing happens. I'll tell you as soon as the TFR people come back in. It takes about 3 minutes. People are talking about Bitcoin in the chat room. I don't think you need a thumb drive to cash in your Bitcoin. The Bitcoin's in your wallet. You have an electronic wallet with Coinbase, or I don't know, there's a dozen and probably 3 or 4 that are superior. But then what you do is you have all of your cryptocurrency, including your Bitcoin or fraction of a Bitcoin, in your wallet, and then you can spend it that way. Yes, ever see Golden Voyage of Sinbad? Yeah, it was pretty good. I think the animation was better in that one than in most of them. The claymation is a little jerky in the other ones. Also, my son said that Kong versus Godzilla is very good. I haven't seen it. Because I'm a fan of both of them. Of course, I was mentioned in the last Godzilla movie, right? The point where Godzilla escapes into the tunnels inside the planet, and the scientist says, Dr. Brooks was right. The Earth is hollow. Well, that's me. I'm Dr. Brooks. They were talking about the hollow Earth. And that part, the other part where there is an actual Dr. Brooks in the movie, it isn't me personally, but could have been, but that part ended up on the editing room floor, but not that statement. Dr. Brooks was right. The Earth is hollow was left in the movie. So, yes, that's mentioning me and my work on Hollow Earth. Well, just interesting stuff in the chat room. Okay, let's bring TFR back in. Might be just a little bit of music in the background.
We are TFR. TFR.
Hour number 2. Okay, we're going to continue our story about the resurrection. So, anyway, to make a long story short, Jesus supernaturally pushes the guards and the priests that have come with them up the pathway, supernaturally puts them on the ground. They fall to the ground, unable to get up. Now, these are centurions. These are one of the, some of the 100 that handle security for the entire city. They're ruthless, and that's why they get this job, because they follow orders. If the orders were to cut off the arms of every 2-year-old boy in the city, they wouldn't hesitate. They would just do it. But now they're on the ground. They're being held on the ground. And Jesus says again, I say unto you, whom seek ye? And they said, we seek Jesus of Nazareth. And he said, I say unto you, I am he. Now let these that are with me go their way. And then he lets them up. He lets them up. They realize he's letting them up because somehow he's holding them down there. So they realize he's voluntarily giving himself to us. We're not taking him by force. That was force. That was force. So he goes through illegal trials all night long where the priest is berating him and slapping him and spitting at him and accusing him. And Jesus says, not a word. Not a word. And so they take him to Pilate in the morning. Pilate goes through various machinations, sends him to Herod. Herod, he says nothing to Herod. Herod sends him back. And Pilate says, well, I'll try something else because my wife told me not to touch a hair on this guy's head because he's a good man and she had a dream about him. And, when mama's not happy, nobody's happy. And I'm just the governor of this place. So I'm going to take advantage of an old Hebrew custom, and I'm going to bring another prisoner out because it's Passover. And I am going to give them a choice of releasing this prisoner or Jesus. And so he got the nastiest, meanest, most ornery hombre that they could find, and his name was Barabbas. Oh, he was a terrorist. I mean, he openly fought with the Roman soldiers, and they had him in jail, and he was fit to be crucified anyway. And nobody liked him. He was brash, and he brought a lot of headache down on the people because of his activity. And so Pilate said, so here's your choice. You can release Barabbas or you can release Jesus. And Jesus said, I'd never harmed anyone, and everybody loved him. So he thought, well, this is my out. This is how we'll do it. But the priests, part of the cabal that are still around to this very day, they positioned themselves here and there around the crowd and took advantage of a psychological phenomenon called contagion, where the priests, using their authority and their dress and their position, began to holler Barabbas. We'll let Barabbas go. And so the people said, well, gosh, if the high priest is wanting Barabbas to be let go, I will too. I don't want to get in trouble. And so they all asked for Barabbas to be released, which would have left Jesus on the hook to be crucified. So the long story short now is the Pilate wants to get out of it. So he says, I'll tell you what I will do. I will scourge him, and then we'll see. And so they lay into him with a scourge, which is a whip. And you've seen plenty of films of this, not the least of which is the one Mel Gibson did called The Passion. But it lays open the flesh, and it's a gruesome to watch. And at the end of that, they pour salt on it. They put a crown of thorns on his head, and he asks for the crowd to let him go. And the crowd still doesn't want to let him go. They still want him crucified. So Pilate washes his hands, a symbolic gesture that, fine, have your will then. This is not my judgment, but yours. And he turns him over to be crucified. So up the hill, Kat, I've asked you 100 times to close that door. He's ridiculous. Go close the door. I can't help you. What can you do with animals? They're not able to take instructions. So what goes on now is, as you know, it's illegal for men to line the road going up to the hill for the ones that are condemned to be crucified, because they get really emotional, they throw shoes, they lunge out at the guards, and so only women can weep and wail along the road. But it is, a time of pilgrims, and not everybody knows the law. And there was a pilgrim whose name was Samuel, and he was, because Jesus was too weak to be able to carry the cross himself, he was put into service to carry the cross up the hill, which he did, happily. And when Jesus was laid down on it, then a little bit more effort was made to fix him to the cross. Normally people are tied to the cross because they want it to last. They want these people to hang up there for days and weep and wail and complain, because it's an example. I mean, you got 500,000 pilgrims coming to town. You want them to behave, and the way to make them behave is to put lawbreakers on crosses lining the road coming into town, so that you have everyone up there from thieves to cheaters to adulterers, and that way the pilgrims know, while I'm here, I better behave myself. I better behave myself, or I'm going to end up on that tree as well. It was just the way Romans kept control of the town, and they had crucified tens of thousands of people. They had holes in the ground. They just dropped the crucifix in the hole because they just did it all the time, every day. Of course, hanging there now next to Jesus, well, let me get back to how they fixed him to it. They didn't tie him, they nailed him. And of course, he was large in stature, so normally they put one nail through the palm of the hand right here. And that's usually enough to hold the weight of the body. But in the cases where they have a very large person, someone who's healthy or strong or tall or whatever, they realize that the nail might actually pull through the flesh of the hand, and they can actually take their hand off of the cross. So they do what's called put a nail in a sure place. And the sure place is the bones that are here in the wrist. You have a lot of flexible bones here, but also some very strong tendons. Hang on one moment. I have to close this door. That's a little bit better, isn't it? Now the cat's scared. Stay scared. Don't open that door. Don't open that door. He's not listening. Anybody want a cat? He's pretty. He's pretty. You'd like him. He's a good cat. Whatever. So they put the nail in the sure place, which is these bones here, and that way it can hold the body weight. And there's one other feature about this that the Romans are very, very good at. There's a nerve that goes through the bones here that takes care of the millions of nerves that are in the fingers. And it also passes down the arm and across the elbow right here. You've hit that before, right? That funny bone area. The nerve is about the size of your little finger. Now, you know that this is the main trunk line of feeling. This nerve is about this big. Of course, as it gets down close to the wrist, it splits off into several pieces, but the main one is about the size of a pencil, and that's the one they hit with the nail. Yeah, they drive the nail right through this nerve, and they do it on purpose. They're really good at it. They're skilled at it. They know when they hit it because as they're pounding it through, they get a reaction from the person that's laying on the cross. But they pound the nail through that nerve, so now he has two nails, one in the palm and one in the wrist. And if you don't know what the sure nail in the sure place is, it's mentioned in Isaiah. The sure sign of the nail, the sure place of the nail. And this has ancient ramifications, ancient meanings to it. But it all points to this one event. So then Jesus' feet are, of course, nailed to the cross, and then he's raised up and dropped into the hole. Of course, he's trying to catch your breath, which is difficult to do when the only way you have to support yourself is to push down with your legs against that nail, raise yourself up, and take a breath so that you can last. The others, the thieves that were hanging next to him, they were tied to the cross, not nailed, and so they'd probably been there for a couple of days. And the first utterance that Jesus says from the cross, I'll say it before and after my explanation. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. From Luke chapter 23, verse 34. Now, the play that Jesus had watched so many times as a youth in Abydos was unfolding exactly as rehearsed. You see, the record has to be written by one worthy to open the gate. Jesus was becoming the Christ through the things he suffered. The guards were just actors in the play, doing what they had done thousands of times on that hill for their dark and ruthless Lord. He asked for their forgiveness in front of their faces. Do you think they really cared? No more than if you asked for forgiveness of your mortal enemy before he cut off your head in public. Jesus was the most wanted enemy of the state. You sort of know what that feels like right now, don't you? Except you are afraid to turn over the tables of the money changers. You are too afraid of losing your possessions and your credit score to do what Jesus did. You want peace instead of justice. You want mercy instead of war. This cycle is well known for billions of years. Peace, justice, war, mercy. Around and around, over and over again, we go around this compass. And until we understand the pure truth of it, we are cursed to tread this mill. Jesus showed the first step of the tangent away from Lucifer's game by telling us what to do. Ask for forgiveness for your enemy, and then prepare for battle. The next utterance, and by the way, it's interesting, is being observed. Some of these utterances, as I say in Luke, were not written down for decades afterwards, so they were recalled upon reflection, not recorded the day that it happened. The second utterance is the next verse. Today you shall be with me in paradise. But it comes after the two thieves are talking one with another. One knows who he is. The other is more antagonistic. He says, if thou be the Christ, then why don't you get us down off of this cross and we can walk away together? And that wasn't to be. Instead, Jesus says, today you shall be with me in paradise. Now here's all the proof you will ever need that we are eternal beings having a mortal experience. When I was killed in May of 2012, the most amazing epiphany for me was when I came back to the living on that warm evening street, lying on my back as the police officer removed my helmet. I said, that was easy. And it was. There was no pain. I still cannot recall the impact of that mindless driver slamming that car into my motorcycle. At that moment, I realized that once you're dead, it is paradise, with one exception. We regret the people we leave behind. It feels like a letter, perhaps only partially written and yet unmailed. The two thieves hanging on nearby crosses are obviously poor. They probably only know stealing a meal or a cloak to stay warm as a way of life. They will all die that afternoon because Jewish law forbids the Romans from letting anyone die on the Sabbath. They will come along soon with a cudgel and smash their femur bones so that they cannot push up to catch another breath during the long torture of crucifixion. The rule of Roman law caught them and sentenced them to be crucified on the road to Jerusalem so that other thieves coming from all over the land to steal from Passover pilgrims would get the message by their dying example. Jesus tells them that when they shed this third-dimensional body for a time, they will feel no hunger or pain or poverty. No one will care how you're dressed in the spirit world. Like the words of John Lennon's song, there are no possessions. There are no countries. There is no hell. No one will do you harm. Paradise? Yes. But it is only a place to rest for a time and to decide what you will become next. When all your friends, or as I like to call them, your pod, arrive, the next great adventurous challenge can be planned. Again and again you live and grow and learn and progress toward completion, even as your Father who is in heaven is complete. And now the third utterance. Jesus looks around at the people at his feet, and he notices John the Beloved, the apostle, and he notices his mother. They're standing next to one another. And John is close to her, close to the whole family. So Jesus looks down and says, "Behold your son. Behold your mother." This is from John chapter 19, verses 26 and 27. Now this utterance is for John. Jesus is simply saying to his closest male friend on the earth, take care of my mom. She was 14 generations deep from the house of David. It was she who carried the right of the crown with her. She was the one from whom he inherited the birthright of king. You would think it was a great honor to be called and to choose to be the mother of the Savior. She was only 47 years old, but she had carried a burden few people understand. From the time he was a young boy, missing from the caravan and found in the temple, he pierced her soul with pain. No one crosses the desert alone. People pay to travel with caravans. It's the only way to stay safe from bandits, as they usually had small security forces that rather enjoyed killing bandits when they tried to pick off supplies or rich travelers who might straggle. Back and forth from Jerusalem the caravans would go. But once you're with one, you do not simply leave and run back because you forgot something, because your son is missing. You have to wait until you pass another caravan going back the other way. It could have been 1 or 2 days of going crazy with anxiety. Have you ever suffered the anxiety of a Jewish mother? Then you might know of what I speak. Finally, Mary and Joseph and James arrive back at Jerusalem and begin asking around. Now, it doesn't take long before they get a lead and then another. When they find him, she goes to scold him about being careless and not obeying his mother. He tells her, "Woman," what young boy calls his mother woman, "knowest thou I must be about my father's business?" His father. Ah, yes, him. He doesn't come around much, ever. Just over the horizon, all powerful and fearsome to many, that father. After a dozen years of watching him grow up in Egypt and learn Joseph's trade, she had almost forgotten. Maybe someone else would come along. Maybe another boy, born to a rich merchant or a warrior, would answer the call. Not her boy. Maybe the angel was mistaken. Maybe it was a dream. And then it was no longer a dream. And then Jesus was moving the universe, one mind changed at a time in the temple. He was fulfilling the prophecy. And then the fourth utterance. My God, why have you forsaken me?" That's from Matthew chapter 27, verse 46. Now, from the time he was a small boy until this very moment, Jesus was linked to his Father. He simply reached out with his heart, and God said, "Here am I." He got instructions along the way. Choose this man, turn this way, travel to this land, heal this one, not that one. As long as his heart remained pure and tuned to the Spirit, that communication was ceaseless, like they were walking side by side along the dusty roads from one village to another. As Jesus had been carrying some of the sins of the world with him all night from the garden, and the burden was great, but then there was a space for his Father to sit. Suddenly, his Father got up and left, and the remaining space was immediately filled with a mudslide of sins that he was to carry with him through the veil. The Father cannot dwell where there is sin, so he left. For the first time in Jesus' memory, there was no link. There was no hand to hold. There was no warm embrace. There was no voice. At this moment, he was just like you and me. The Father was far away in a distant part of the universe, perhaps, weeping. I think he was. I do. I think about it. Jesus knew, but no faith could prepare him for the act itself. Like watching a loved one die before their time, we delay and deny that moment some consideration, but then it is there. It's real and consuming every morsel of energy in the room, and you as well. He was consumed, and yet he knew. He did not have faith any longer. It had become knowledge. The fifth utterance, TFR is going to go to break in it. We wait for that and send them in about to 15 seconds. And then we'll take a short break, just 3 minutes, and we'll come back with the fifth utterance. Please don't go away. I promise. You'll learn something, maybe, and hopefully you'll feel something. I don't want the people at TFR, the few that are listening there, to miss it. So it's good for their archives as well. We'll let them go to break right now, and then we'll bring them back and continue. Okay, there you go. So let's talk a little bit in the chat room. What do we got here? Yeah, so many good thoughts. Space Lincoln Landry says, I'm not coming back. You say that now, we might need you. I said the same thing. Let's go ahead and fill up. I'm going to add about 100 lemons here and see if I can give them away on D Live while we're on break here. All right, so we got about 100 lemons in there. We'll find out in about 30 seconds who's listening on D Live gets to put lemons in their crypto bank. It's real money. It is. You can take it out. I'm just showing my appreciation for you being there on D Live and listening. It's a great platform. We love the people at D Live. They work so hard. They do such a great job for us. 3 seconds. Okay, we have Michael 1973 gets 39.2. Mailer Damon gets 22.9. Steve Y62, I have not seen you before, 16.8. Analanza 11, 13.6, and 20206 11.5. Thank you so much for being out there listening on dlive.tv. We appreciate you so much. Thanks for being there. Got about 1 minute before the TFR people come back. Thank you very much, A. Carpenter. He says, many blessings to you and your family, and I give that out to all of you as well. Yeah, Space Lincoln Landrew makes an interesting observation. Odd thought, Jesus might, in a sense, be a clone of Mary. As it turns out, biologically, whenever we would imagine a virgin birth, the birth is always going to be a male child, because the DNA that comes to make up the other half of the DNA that would make up a male child comes from the mitochondria of the female. So the female actually carries the haploid DNA in the mitochondria. So it is all male DNA that's in the mitochondria. So that is what happens. Virgin births are very rare. They do occur. They have occurred several times in the scriptures and even other ancient writings. Jesus was not the only virgin birth. Okay, let's bring TFR back in. Let them finish the story with us.
enigmatv.com.
Real people, real radio. Wherever you are, make it TFR. Truth Frequency Radio.
I've been waiting for this moment since my first breath in. Never would have thought I'd be afraid to begin, but here I am, the edge of the water, wondering if I can swim. Never seem to notice all the days pass through, but in this final moment I'm still chasing the truth. I want an explanation why I can't stay here forever in my youth. And if I press on, forever, or would it be wrong to ask you to come with? Tell me, will you wait?
Yes, we'll stay here with you forever. The fifth utterance from the cross is, I am thirsty. This comes from John chapter 19, verse 28. Only through the things that he suffered did he become the Christ. While he was there, dying and feeling the pain of it, a short distance away, the final night of the Passover was celebrated with the supper, eaten by thousands of households all over the city of Jerusalem. 500,000 pilgrims sat at small tables with 8 candles and a shank bone, carpus, cheseret, charoset, maror, and a roasted egg, waiting for the lamb to be delivered to their house. Just up on the hill in the city, 256,000 lambs were being slaughtered at the temple. Their blood shed and dribbled over the altar where hundreds of priests worked to prepare the meat. The lambs, for hundreds of years, had been sacrificed in this way, according to strict rules laid out by God for them. Over and over again they practiced the words and the symbols and asked for forgiveness as the lambs took their sins away. And while they ate and laughed and hugged and celebrated their bounty at being able to celebrate as a pilgrim in Jerusalem, the genuine lamb, the one for whom all the millions of lambs had been slain, was hanging on the cross and near to death for the very sins they lamented this night. The sixth utterance. It is finished. John chapter 19, verse 30. He did not die a moment too soon. He waited. For what? What was he waiting for? He was waiting for you. He was waiting for your sins. All of them. Those that you have done and those that you will yet do. His mission was not to come to earth to proclaim his divinity. Why would he ever need our affirmation of that? No. He came to show us of our divinity. He came to show us that we were so important to him and to his Father that he was willing to come and pay the price for your sins. You are the divine ones if you will choose it. For many are called, but few there be that choose. You choose. No one else chooses. No God or host of gods can change that. It's important that you know that. In fact, it is the most important thing that you can learn in mortal life. Now, the waiting was over. It was just him and your sins. He was ready. The section in the Akashic record for the resurrection of mankind was being written by the one and only author who could write it. And now it was done. And the final utterance. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Luke chapter 23, verse 46. Nothing more in this mortality to do, except to carry the sins through the veil and pay the price for them. There will be no grounds for an accuser. We all have those now, don't we? We accuse ourselves as well. If we choose to accept this payment for our sins, then we are free to go. free to go. How does that sound? When you are at the end and there is nothing you can do to make right what you have done, when your heart is in pain, or when you have all but extinguished that light inside of you, to hear the words, "You are free to go," might be the coals heaped upon your head. It might be the fork in your path that you can take away from fear and toward the love of yourself, and thus of your neighbor, and thus of God. So I want to play a song for you. I'll probably get a copyright hit on it, but I don't care. Song written by a songwriter out in Utah. His name is Kenneth Copeland, and you may have heard it before, but I doubt you have. So I'm going to play it for you because it's fitting for this right here. Just please acknowledge in the chat room if you can hear that music.
His hands, tools of creation, stronger than nations, power without end. And yet through them we find our truest friend. His hands, sermons of kindness, healing men's blindness, halting years of pain, children waiting to be held again. His hands would serve his whole life through, showing man what hands might do, giving, ever giving endlessly. Each day was filled with selflessness, and I'll not rest till I make up my hands what they could be. Till these hands become like those from Galilee. His hands lifting a leper, warming a beggar, calling back the dead, breaking bread, 5,000 fed. His hands hushing contention, pointing to heaven, ever free of sin, then bidding man to follow him. His hands would serve his whole life through, showing man what hands might do, giving, ever giving endlessly. Each day was filled with selflessness, and I'll not rest till I make up my hands what they could be. Till these hands become like those from Galilee. His hands clasped in agony as he lay pleading, bleeding in the garden. been able to as he stumbles through the streets, heading for the hill on which he died. He would die. They take his hands, his mighty hands, those gentle hands. Clearly now I see him with his hands calling to me, and though I'm not yet as I would be, he has shown me how I could be. I will make my hands like those from
I thought you would enjoy that. Well played and well said and well sung, and I appreciate it very much. That is my Easter message for 2021. Hopefully we can look beyond the bunnies and the eggs and think about the true message, that it is not about crucifixion, it is about the resurrection. And it's kind of interesting how great his love was, not just for us, but also for Mary. That scene where it shows that he had returned and Mary was alone, and she was looking for him, and she did not recognize him right away, and she asked him, what they had done with him. And he asked her, "Woman, why weepest thou?" And she didn't recognize him. But then he had a certain way of saying her name. Just only he would say it that way. And when he said her name, Mary, she realized it was him. And of course, she was overwhelmed with joy and went to embrace him. And he stopped her and said, "Touch me not, for I have not yet ascended to my Father which is in heaven. Go tell the others that I have returned, and I'll come to see them shortly." And you have to wonder about that, because if he was, freshly resurrected and yet had not returned to heaven to complete the mission, he could have in some way maybe defiled himself by re-engaging with a mortal person, letting a mortal person touch him before he had returned. But he felt it so important to see her. And think about the importance of that he went to see her before he went to see his own Father. That is powerful. That is very powerful. And if you've ever sat and meditated on that and been shown that scene, witnessed it, watched it, felt it, and then had him look over at you, and you get it. You understand what love means. It's powerful. Yeah, it's interesting. Space Lincoln Landrew says there is a story she got up before dawn and wiped his blood from every place had stopped. I don't know exactly what that means, but that maybe she saw his body, or maybe she saw the blood on the ground. I don't know what that means. You have to be more clear with that. But Anyway, happy Easter to all of you, and to Bob Hawk, thank you very much. He says, Easter blessings all. Thanks, Brooks. I appreciate that very much. Thank you all for being here on Easter Sunday. It's not a very popular night to be out, and we have a small group tonight, maybe about 100, and I appreciate you all coming out and listening live. All right, so I want to move on. Talk a little bit about climate change. I give you updates from time to time. I share with you evidence that Earth is nearing a climate change toward an ice age. The global syndicate wants America and Europe to pay them a weather tax. You know that. So they can fight against global warming. That's what they tell you, but they actually just want to make us rich at their expense. And lots and lots of people, billions of people, are revolting against this. As you and a couple billion other people around the world know, this is a total scam. The truth is that the Earth is not warming. The sun is not warming the Earth like it normally does, less and less as a matter of recorded fact. So there was a severe thunderstorm cloud that formed over the Pacific Ocean in 2018 and actually reached the coldest temperatures ever recorded. Yes. Now, the very top of the storm cloud reached a bone-chilling minus 167.8 degrees Fahrenheit. That's colder than any storm cloud measured before. Thunderstorms and tropical cyclones, a circular low-pressure storm, can reach very high altitudes, upwards of 11 miles from the ground, where the air is much cooler. But you don't normally see temperatures that cold, 50, 60, 70 below sometimes. But this new temperature is on another level. The top of the storm cloud was about 86 degrees colder than typical storm clouds. And the beast of a storm loomed about 249 miles south of Nauru in the southwest Pacific on the 29th of December, 2018. And its cloud's temperature was picked up by an infrared sensor aboard the U.S.'s NOAA-20 satellite orbiting the planet. Now, this is interesting because, you know, these things have a range that they can sense, outside of which they're not effective. The storms typically spread out to an anvil-like shape when they reach the top of the troposphere, the lower layer of Earth's atmosphere. But if a storm has a lot of energy, it will shoot to the next layer, which is the stratosphere. Now, this phenomenon, known as overshooting top, pushes storm clouds to very high altitudes where it's bitterly cold. Overshooting tops are reasonably common. Lead author Simon Proud, a research fellow at the National Center for Earth Observation at Oxford University, reported typically an overshooting top cools by about 12.6 degrees Fahrenheit for every kilometer it rises in the stratosphere. But this particular storm, was extreme. This storm achieved an unprecedented temperature that pushes the limits of what the current satellite sensors are capable of measuring. We found that these really cold temperatures seem to be becoming more common. Now, in the last 3 years, scientists have logged the same number of extremely cold temperatures in clouds as they did in the 13 years before that. And this is really important, as thunderstorms with colder clouds tend to be more extreme and more hazardous to people on the ground due to hail, lightning, and wind, because once you get a Van de Graaff generator, let's say, that size, you're generating tremendous amounts of electricity. Now, this particular storm may have been energized by a combination of very warm water in the region and eastward moving wind, but it's not clear why these colder temperatures in the storm clouds are becoming more common. So we now need to understand if this increase is due to our changing climate, or whether it's due to a perfect storm of weather conditions producing outbreaks of extreme thunderstorms in the past few years. When these occur over oceans, especially if they're not very well populated by planes or ships on the water or in the air, it doesn't seem to have that much of an effect. But if these were to occur over land, say over the northeastern United States or over Australia or over South America somewhere, the pulling this stratospheric air down through the cloud, even to the ground, if the velocity of the wind can get high enough, are the superstorm conditions that Whitley Strieber and Art Bell talked about in their book, The Coming Global Superstorm. And it matches up with math models that mathematicians are starting to do about weather conditions that are aligning with this very quiet sun. Since the sun is not energizing our atmosphere is thinning, which means it doesn't have the insulative qualities that it once had, and that allows more energy to leak back out into space. That is something that that we're cautioning about, because we could be nearing an ice age, and these are the kinds of temperatures that can be brought on if that occurs. So that's why we're interested in that. So something else about sunlight here. Sunlight actually kills the COVID virus, and it does it rather quickly. A team of scientists is calling for greater research into how sunlight inactivates the SARS-CoV after realizing there's a glaring discrepancy between the most recent theory and experimental results. UC Santa Barbara mechanical engineer Paolo Luzzatto Fegiz and colleagues noticed the virus was inactivated as much as 8 times faster in experiments than in most theoretical models predicted. The theory assumes that inactivation occurs after having UVB hit the RNA of the virus, damaging it. We call this process photodimerization. UVB and UVC are rather short wavelength, like 340, 320 nanometers. And at this wavelength, the photons at that wavelength have the ability to sputter off electrons that make a double bond. So when you have like 2 carbon atoms close to one another, sometimes they will have a double bond between them. And this is a unsaturated carbon, but it is typical in proteins. And what happens when that photon comes in and sputters that electron off, it breaks that double bond. And so the 2 carbon atoms can come apart. The DNA becomes damaged. It's a process called photodimerization. And the dimerization creates a free radical, which is very reactive with other things. And it causes a mutation, irreversible mutation in that DNA. It dies. The discrepancy suggests that there's a lot more going on here, and it's worth figuring out. Of course, UV light, we don't really like to be exposed to UVC, which is even shorter wavelength. We don't even like being exposed to UVB because it will burn and damage your skin, causing skin cancer. That's why it occurs, because the DNA gets damaged and the skin mutates. It's easily absorbed by certain nucleic acid bases in DNA and RNA, which can cause them to bond in ways that are hard to fix. Not all the UV light is the same. Longer UV waves, called UVA, they don't quite have enough energy to cause the problems. It's the mid-range UVB waves, they're shorter wavelength and thus higher energy, that are primarily responsible for killing microbes and putting our own cells at risk of sun damage. Short-wave UVC radiation has also been shown to be effective against viruses, but it's not something that we want to be exposed to on our skin. It can cause blindness. It can actually burn your eyes. And this doesn't really have that much contact with the Earth's surface at sea level, because the atmosphere has a tendency to block that off, and the ozone layer will absorb these very short wavelengths. I have a caller on the line in New York, but hang out because we're coming up on break. As soon as the break is over, then I'll bring you on. So just hang out for about 3 minutes up there in New York. In July of 2020, the experiment tested the effects of UV light on the COVID in a simulated saliva. We'll come back right after this break, TFR, so just hang out a little bit. Luzzatto and his team compared those results with a theory about how sunlight achieved this. It was published a month later, and the math doesn't seem to add up because the virus was 3 times more sensitive to UV in the sunlight than influenza A, which was the test virus. It had a 90% of the particles were inactivated in just half an hour of exposure to midday sunlight in summer. So it would seem like if you want everybody to get well, the place to go is the beach in summer, okay? Environmental calculations made by a separate team of researchers concluded the virus's RNA molecules are being photochemically damaged directly by the light rays. This is more powerfully achieved by shorter wavelengths of light like UVC and UVB. But as I said, UVC doesn't strike the Earth at sea level. It will at higher altitudes, especially up in the Himalayas or above 8,000 feet for sure. Experimentally observed inactivation in simulated saliva is over 8 times faster than what we had been expected from the theory, so scientists don't yet know what's going on. The researchers suspect it's possible that instead of affecting RNA directly, long-wave UVA might be interacting with the molecules in the testing medium, which also included spit or saliva, in a way that hastens the inactivation of the virus. If UVA can be harnessed to combat SARS, then cheap and energy-efficient wavelength-specific light sources might be useful in augmenting air filtration systems at relatively low risk for human health. We haven't seen that, but UVB is certainly achievable with black lights or stuff like that in air filtration systems that could wipe the virus out, especially if it's airborne. It wouldn't even be shielded by liquid in any way. With the ability of this virus to remain suspended in the air for extended periods of time, the safest means to avoid it in countries where it's running rampant is still social distancing and wearing masks, where distancing isn't possible. But it's nice to know that sunlight may be helping us out during the warmer months. I think maybe by the end of this summer, we should see the end of COVID. By the way, that was published in the Journal of Infectious Diseases. So I've got a Ukrainian update, but before we do that, I want to go ahead and bring a caller on. We've got a little bit of TFR intro music to play here. We're entering our 3rd hour, so just hang out with me, and we'll get right to it. And bring them back in.
Title game. America is listening to Fox News.
Into the truth frequency.
Your protection from deception. This is Truth Frequency Radio.
right, welcome back. Third hour of X Squared Radio tonight. Still coming to you live Easter Sunday from an undisclosed location east of the Appalachian Mountains. We have a caller from New York. Welcome to the program. What's on your mind?
What do you call it? The second Declaration of Independence that Trump supposedly signed. That's one thing, and then the other thing is that I met a guy online, and he's supposedly ex-military, and he's looking into trying to get islands down off the coast of Florida for veterans, basically for other people too, but mainly for veterans to help with people, like kind of like a big prepper. Like he's trying to do like a big prep thing for like, you know, lots of people.
Well, let's talk about the Declaration of Independence. What was that?
So last year, 2020, supposedly Trump signed the Declaration of Independence, the second Declaration of Independence, and it's basically a rough draft summary of the history of what's gone on since the Civil War, since the end of the Civil War, and how America was indebted to the bankers because of the war, and how it was fraudulent in 1913. The whole us going bankrupt and then getting taken over again financially. So it's basically, it just goes over that and human trafficking and the global elite and the cabal of the deep state. And at the end, it states that as long as the deep state backs away from society and goes back to their homes and their places, they can keep their things and not die. But they have to leave everyone else alone, pretty much.
I don't think they did that.
That's basically what it's supposed to come down to.
Yeah, I don't think they did that. I think they doubled down on it. I think they applied themselves and used their cheat-by-mail system to steal the 2020 election. That's why 500,000 of my friends and I went to Washington to stand a line and make sure that they knew that we were watching. Of course, the Antifa and all that went in and spoiled everything for everybody. And, of course, the global media empire made a big deal out of it, which it wasn't. And I think they kind of turned the tables. But, you know, how many days have we gone now? 70 days into Virtual Joe's administration. And you couldn't have torn the country apart if you had invaded it with the CCP any worse than it is right now. So I think, you know, my opinion is every day that we go on with this charade, it gets harder and harder to recover this country and put it back where it's supposed to be. Are those your thoughts too?
Right. Yeah, but Trump, I don't know. What do you think about Trump? Because let's see the thing with Sidney Powell. And it was stating that, what do you call it? She stated that Trump could have done things differently, and she was disappointed in his lack of doing things or whatever.
Yeah, I think we all are, you know, because Trump didn't just lose an election. He lost a country. And that really hurts a lot of people. It doesn't just hurt Americans. It also hurts Canadians and Mexicans.
But he didn't lose, though. You know what I mean? So I don't understand why, like, if the people really voted for him, then he didn't lose, regardless of what anyone wants to say.
Yeah, but see, with the global syndicate, winning is everything, even if you cheat. Even if you get the global media empire to say, you know, how dare you attempt to overturn an election? We cheated fair and square. You know, it's sort of like they're backing away from the card table with their 45 drawn with all the winnings. They have the gun, and everyone else is sitting at the table going, well, yeah, you cheated, but you have the gun, so go ahead and take the money. And that's pretty much what they've done. I don't know how to get it back is what I'm saying. If we could have done something, it would have been done on January 6th when they were debating about the Arizona being able to place a slate of electors that were chosen by the legislature, and other states were getting ready to do the same thing.
Okay.
So had those
let me
electors
unload on
been
you then.
placed, then the election would never have fallen. It would have been a constitutional crisis, but it would have been the governors and their Secretary of States against the legislature, and the Supreme Court would have had to step in and said, I'm sorry, guys, but the state legislature trumps the governor.
So basically what's happened is Trump has helped to expose all of the people that would go against the elite, and all of these supposed Republican people that have now joined up that were all for Trump
I agree.
are now trapped inside of the Capitol Hill, and all those people that are that went to the Capitol, that didn't even go to Capitol, that went to Washington D.C., are all subject to being arrested within 5 years because it's for one, did you know that it's a felony to protest anywhere near Secret Service? And that was written back in 2009 or 2010 underneath Obama. Obama signed it into law that it's illegal you get a felon, you can be fined. And all those rallies that Trump had the last 2020 were supposedly protests. Right? They weren't rallies. Remember, they were saying they were protests, peaceful protests. And so it doesn't matter if Trump wants to do something about it or not. They could sit there and try to charge them state-wise. And then if the Republicans are betraying everybody, then the governors can turn around and obviously start arresting all these people that were coming up to these rallies or whatever, or these protests, whatever they want to be called. And don't forget that Secret Service can be assigned to anyone. It could be a reporter. It could be just anyone. So if you're protesting near anyone who's got Secret Service and you don't know about it because it's Secret Service, you could be charged with a felony. And then if people are charged with a felony, so let's say all those people that are at the Capitol or whatever that went there, everybody, the whole 500,000, eventually within 5 years they could easily come for all you and then just charge you with felonies and make deals so this way you get hit with a felony and you can't vote, but you don't necessarily do time or whatever. So this is what's going on. This is what my thought was or whatever. I also had other thoughts and ideas as to realities, but that's basically the most solid, logical, least crazy idea that is possible with this crazy world.
Yeah, I see your point. I see your point. Yeah, we're all guilty, I suppose. Space Lincoln Lander says in the chat room, the DHS is helping illegals. We have no friends in government. I kind of feel the same way. What we see happening on the border is...
And then that comes down to cops, though. Like, what are we supposed to do about cops? Because cops aren't necessarily the government, but they're working for them. You know, there's no way around that. So they're an extension of these people that we now know are treasonous traitors or, at best, not good for the position. They don't care about the people, so...
Yeah, they're just revenuers. I call them revenuers. They're just there to collect tax for the state.
Right. So it's just a matter of, like, this is real situation that we're in, and people aren't discussing the real topics, like, for instance, what we're supposed to do about the cops. Because if the people that are in the cops' place don't want to do the right thing and step down, and, like, when I say step down, I mean take all their guns, take everything with them, and go protect their communities. You know what I mean? Like, that's obviously the step that's supposed to be taking place now. So if these cops don't do the right thing, which is step down from being cops, not because they're scared and it's because obviously they're not going to work for the government anymore. I mean, this is just like common sense shit right now that nobody's talking about, and it's really fucking sad and pathetic. Sorry. It's really sad and it's really pathetic, and it's, you know, like, come on. This is what needs to be said. This is what needs to be talked about.
Yeah, and it's not just us that are losing faith in the rule of law. Other nations are losing faith in our rule of law as well. And when you see
and money system.
Yeah, and the money system's right. Because, you know, what we're working for is value. We're providing value at our place of work. And they're supposedly giving us a voucher for the value that we have delivered at work. And then we can take that voucher, we can go buy a TV or food or fuel or whatever it is we need for our home or make our house payments with that value. But when that system of value, the system of exchange has itself become corrupt, and the system of exchange has itself become a business, and that business is to keep the middle class from existing anymore. Like, somebody asked me what I did with my stimulus check. And I said, well, first of all, that was my money. It took it out of my paycheck. It was my money. And then they gave me my money back. They gave me $2,800 of my money back. And I took the $2,800 and I paid my federal and state taxes with it that I owed. So it was a wash. You know, they took the taxes out of my check, then they gave it back to me, then I gave it back to them. And now the account's square. So you see, there was no value exchanged at all. Not at all. Why didn't they just let me keep my money in the first place, instead of all these people taking a portion of my money for themselves? And every single person should feel that exact same way.
Well, real quick, money, so that everyone else understands, because you probably do, money is nothing more than time and energy. It takes time plus energy to make money.
Sure.
And so when it comes to the question that you just asked, why would they have you jump through all these loops? Well, it's for that reason, time and energy. That's the whole reason why they have you having money, getting money in the first place, because they could have made everything with Nikola Tesla type technology so that you wouldn't have to work for your fuel. You wouldn't have to work for your energy. It could have been freely done. The entire world can be set up in a way that you don't actually have to pay money. Everything can be just you. You like to work on cars, you just simply work on cars. You like to help people with their mind, you simply work on their mind. You like to teach people English, you just simply teach the English. Like, so
that's exactly right.
I mean, that's not just how I see it,
but I mean, normally we would be able to, in a small community, we would be able to exchange that value without any kind of currency in the system. But because our community is spread not only over a state, but maybe over a country and perhaps even over the world, depends on where we're buying stuff, is spread so far, then we have to use this system of exchange in order to transfer the value from one place to another. And that's the problem.
Say that last part again. Oh, just sorry.
Well,
continue.
What I was saying is, we perform our time and energy in our local community, but not everything that we would exchange that for is in our local community. Otherwise, it would be easy to barter one with another. You know, I come paint your house and you fix my teeth, kind of thing. But our community of commerce is much bigger than that. It spreads over the state and the country and maybe even internationally. So we need a system of exchange in order to get the value from, the car that I fix here in North Carolina to a book that I want to buy that's printed in Tennessee. That's just how we have to do it. And the issue is that the system of exchange itself has become corrupt. The people that are administrating the system of exchange have become greedy and are beginning to tap into the value that they had no part in creating whatsoever. And I think that's the problem.
Well, yeah. In with that regard of people not having much value or whatever, or not producing many things, it's also in human nature let's say you go and produce a painting, your value to that painting is how much other people value it, and how much other people are entertained by that.
Sure.
So in a sense, we need people that aren't necessarily producing, because they're going to be consuming, and it might not be necessarily food, but it might be consuming art. Their attention and time is built around whoever that person may be for whatever reason, their talent, skill, or whatever. So they might not be doing much producing, but like I said, they're consuming. Their consumption is there for a reason. It helps to cycle into the whole. Because some people, the more people that like their stuff, the better they produce. You know what I mean?
Higher demand
So
and lower supply.
it helps to make them produce better.
Right.
Yeah.
Higher demand and lower supply. But when, like, for instance, my bank, normally if you keep let's say a balance of $500 in your checking account, you don't pay a fee. Why? Because the $500 is sitting in the bank, and the bank can use it to exchange money on the money market when the banks close, and they make money off your money. But what do? They charge you $15 a month for the privilege of having a checking account at the bank. And so you're paying $180 a year, and they may have 1 million accounts, so that's $180 million a year that they take in for nothing. We're providing nothing but a virtual place to park your money.
But don't worry, they'll give you pennies for interest, though.
Yeah, we make it all back at over 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Why do banks have lollipops for the customers?
Because all the customers are suckers. I don't know.
Exactly. But no, seriously, that's. I mean, you got to think about it. I mean, what's the point of going to a bank and all that? Really, when you really, because I was like 10 years old when I was thinking about money, and I realized that money was only valued with what we gave value to, and gold only had the value that we gave it to. If we all valued as rocks as much as we valued gold, we'd be billionaires. So I mean, trillionaires. So it's just like, ever since I was a kid, I just never saw any real importance in money. And from there, I could see the rest of society is fake too. And it's just like, people need to wake up and stop being fake and stop accepting this fakeness that, it deals with everything. We can't, if we're going to be real, if we're going to have a real society, you especially can't have an entire system of finance built on beliefs. And that's it. Just like, I believe that this gold is worth a lot because not many people have it. Like, why does our system need to be set up that way? Why can't it be opposite? Why can't we value what there's much of? Why can't we value
that's right.
Anyways.
And if you look over time, what happens is you have this elite, the ones who have more than they could ever spend in 100 lifetimes. And what's their biggest fear? Their biggest fear is poverty. In fact, their biggest fear is that someone else will come and try to share in their stuff, which is the middle class. They hate the middle class, so they want to make sure that there are only two classes of beings on the earth, them and the impoverished.
Don't do that.
They don't want a middle class.
Stop. You got a plate right there. Yeah, I'm hearing you. There's something going on over here.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. Happy Easter, speaking of which.
Same to you, my friend.
Happy Easter. Yeah. And, so basically, it was a very good conversation, and I'm sorry there's some stuff going on here this time, so I wasn't able to
no problem. Okay.
listen on everything.
All
But
right.
happy Easter, and I basically wanted to mention the independence and whatnot, and Trump's. I mean, what is the point of Trump of him doing what do you call it? Like, for instance, that girl Jenna Ellis, right?
Yeah.
Trump's lawyer or whatever.
Yeah.
She made that show. She started that show. Have you seen it? Just the Truth on the American Voice channel or whatever.
Yeah.
So my point is why is she like, her whole show's about the law and the Bible. Now, why would she be wasting her time promoting this if she thinks that the country is going to go down? And then Trump's also starting his own whatever you call it, his company, his social media company. And on top of that, he used to have an airline company. He can restart an airline company. All these businesses that are canceling all these Trump supporters and all these people in general, Trump could pick all of them up, like the entire world. He could start building a business, Trump Burgers and Trump Airlines and Trump this and that, or whatever he wants to do, MAGA, whatever.
It's true.
And just take all these customers and all these people and just start making trillions of dollars.
That's
all
what's
over the
going to
world.
happen with the social media. He's got the instant he starts his social media, he's going to have
But he
80
can go
million
beyond
followers.
Social media, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, right.
Like, it's not just social media. He can go way beyond that, and
He
he already
could.
technically has. Like, he already had them, so he might still have airports. You know what I mean? That he bought, or at least had some money, or like, you know, stock in or something. So,
Well, I would follow. I would follow because we need a good leader, and he's a good leader, and I just think that he cares more about the country than he does himself. I appreciate you calling, my friend. Have a great week.
Thank you.
And
you too.
Happy Easter to you.
Yes, you too.
All right, Earth Explorers. Let's. We got about 4 minutes left in this segment, but I want to talk about Ukraine because I've been giving you for about 3 weeks now my updates on the Ukraine, and slowly but surely the other pundits out there, other Earth Explorers with their own programs and access to video and podcasts are coming around. As you know already, Virtual Joe is heavily compromised by wealthy oligarchs in Ukraine who have been laundering U.S. taxpayer funds and feeding Hunter and Joe money on the side for filling the funnel with money, our money. Those oligarchs don't want any part of Ukraine to be annexed to Russia. If they do, their 1,000-year-old game is over. 2 states in particular I've been talking to you about, Donetsk and Luhansk. Fighting has been ongoing for about 6 years in this area. 6 years. Although your news doesn't tell you about these things, there are 3 factions involved. There is NATO with their SS-style soldiers trying to take over the states for the global syndicate to control. They also use Al-Qaeda fighters, by the way, as they are good at it. There are what people call the separatists. These are people who want to be annexed back into Russia. They are communists, but only in their form of government. They are fighting the NATO SS soldiers on the streets and have been for many years. There are the oligarchs who want to hold onto Ukraine as a sovereign country and continue to take the spoils of their centuries-old fiefdoms. They fight the separatists and the NATO soldiers. These are the ones primarily fighting to keep Putin out of the country. Now, thus far, Russian forces are moving into defensive positions to counter the aggressive advances of NATO forces. For about 9 years now, NATO has been moving artillery, planes, and troop positions closer and closer to the border of Ukraine. NATO tell the news that the people of Ukraine are asking for their protection and their assistance. Putin knows from a century of fighting them that they are moving their supply chain close to Russia in order to attack. He wants them to stop, but they are not listening. Heavy artillery fire from the Ukrainian army has rained down on Luhansk late Friday evening as the army attempted to conquer the breakaway state. Numerous civilian buildings have been hit, huge explosions in the area of the capital school number 50, which is in the Malaya Vergunki district. MLRS also being used by Ukrainian military. Donetsk forces front lines are being struck. Numerous civilians have been injured or killed. These states want to be annexed the way Crimea was annexed 6 years ago. Now, the global syndicate's trying to block the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. It's being laid right next to the Nord Stream 1 pipeline through the Nordic waters to reach Germany directly. It has been reported that European vessels have been recently filmed ramming the pipe-laying ships and submarines being deployed to screw up the pipe being laid for the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline from Russia to Europe. The Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline is being constructed from Russia to northern Germany along the floor of the Baltic Sea. President Donald Trump spoke bluntly to Europe, saying, and I quote, "You want the U.S. to protect you from Russia, but then you enter in an agreement with Russia to buy billions of dollars of gas from them." Trump went on to ask, why should the U.S. continue to pay billions to protect Europe when Europe chooses to do business with the very entity they seek protection from? That was a very valid point. The answer lies with Virtual Joe being deeply compromised by the global syndicate in his criminal money laundering in Ukraine. This is why Johns McCain and Kerry and Victoria Nuland started the civil war in Ukraine in the first place. They want the gas to be supplied from the Golan Heights through Iranian control. It will be the cash cow for the syndicate and give them control over half of Europe. This is why I have been saying that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline has become a very much larger issue than anyone has led you to believe. Now, Virtual Joe wants to stop it from being completed. His high crimes go beyond anything any president has ever done. He is using our own naval vessels to conduct this criminal activity. This isn't private industry doing this. It's one or more governments doing it. When a state orders and uses its own assets to conduct acts of aggression like this, it is considered an act of war. Ships ramming one another in open ocean to stop the laying of pipeline is not accidental. With the West attacking Russia gas pipelines in the Baltic Sea and attacking the vessels laying those pipelines, and the West attacking Russian ally, Syria, in the Middle East, and stealing tens of millions of dollars in Syrian oil every month for years in the process, and now the West pushing Ukraine to go to war with Russia. Is it any wonder at all why Russia is fortifying its borders and preparing for an attack by NATO forces? Everything Russia has done has been defensive so far. The only question on my mind right now is this. If the Ukrainian President Zelensky announces he has been attacked by Russia, with Virtual Joe, would he send American kids to die for their civil war? Will Russia dare invade Ukraine? Would Russia move to block the Suwalki Gap? A lot of you don't know what the Suwalki Gap is, but I'm going to explain that to you. The possible isolation of the Baltic region is linked to what's called the Suwalki Gap and this geostrategic position of the Kaliningrad region. The Kaliningrad region was historically belonged to East Prussia, but it was annexed. In a second, I'm going to bring TFR back in about 45 seconds. It was annexed by the Soviet Union after World War II and operates now as a federal subject of the Russian Federation, although it is completely separated from the Russian mainland. The Suwalki Gap, or corridor, is about 115 kilometers wide, and it's a border between Lithuania and Poland. It connects Kaliningrad with Belarus, Russia's long-standing ally in the region. Back in.
EnigmaTV.com.
Final segment. Here we go.
Get to the truth frequency.
Your protection from deception. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
So the aim of Russia's well-targeted actions in the region is to delegitimize the NATO alliance and furthermore to challenge the current international security order and replace it with a new one, where Russia has significantly greater authority and influence. In a nutshell, Russia is ready to systematically and gradually, as much as the country's budget will allow, increase tensions in the area near Russia's mainland with historical and symbolic value to maintain and increase internal support. Because if he loses his internal support, he loses his ability to function. Internally, Russian expansionism is framed as an appropriate response to the supposedly imperialistic actions of NATO and, of course, of the U.S., not under Donald Trump, but certainly under Joe Biden. From Russia's perspective, both Kaliningrad and the Suwalki corridor constitute favorable places where Russia's ability to mobilize in time of peace to escalate the conflict is greater than that of the NATO alliance. And it is. It is. The country has at most 3 armies available in the Western Military District. Furthermore, Russia also has a clear advantage in mobilizing up to another 20 brigades, and by now they have already mobilized 53 brigades in time of peace, as well as in benefiting from greater territorial depth and more alternatives in search in terms of logistical routes than the NATO forces in the Baltic countries. Baltic countries, if they try to let NATO into these areas, it's going to be very awkward. They don't belong there. They don't speak the language. It's going to look very aggressive. It's not only going to look like they're trying to seize territory, but it's going to look like they're trying to move hardware, missiles, tanks, artillery, men, closer to Russia. And that is going to be seen as being aggressive, and Russia is going to defend itself against that. Since Russia could not move military resources more easily and more extensively in this region compared to the NATO alliance, it is reasonable to assume that escalation of the conflict would most likely be favorable to Russia, insofar as direct conventional conflict is simply out of the question. It just cannot happen. It would plunge the whole region into war. For the NATO alliance, every single scenario, all of them, from increasing regional security to actual conventional mobilization, come with very high costs in, well, the public eye for one. And for another, they don't belong there. They're not supposed to be there. Additional deployments in the region under the auspices of increasing security, it's going to be costly and it's going to be institutionally very complicated. For example, the former commander of the U.S. Army in Europe and retired lieutenant general in the U.S. Army, Ben Hodges, suggested for many reasons why Poland's recent offer to establish a permanent U.S. military presence in Poland would undermine the cohesion of the NATO alliance. Furthermore, in real terms, this step would not even contribute to the regional conventional balance, which would actually need another 18 brigades instead of merely a single brigade. Should this alliance still decide the latter, it would allow Russia to both maintain the moral upper hand in the region, and it would justify its additional deployments based on the argument that NATO is being aggressive and they're being offensive. Okay, so Russia can move in and be defensive, which gives them the higher ground. For both parties to the potential confrontation, Russia and the NATO alliance, the cost of conflict in the Suwalki Gap and the Kaliningrad are first and foremost determined by geographical and ethnic factors. And Russia wins. Russia wins. These people are Russian, they speak Russian, and they don't trust Europe. They don't trust them. Look what Europe did to Greece. Look what Europe did to Italy. They broke them. They bankrupted them. And they would do worse to the Ukraine. The potential costs associated with geographic factors would most likely be significant for both parties because specific capabilities and tactics are going to be needed to conduct military operations. And that's going to be the political balance, no doubt about it. Now, as far as the ethnic factor in the Suwalki corridor is concerned, at first sight, Russia seems to have a disadvantage, but that's not entirely true. That's just on the surface. Ilak and Sliwa point out that the population in the Suwalki corridor mainly comprises Polish nationals. There's about 2.5 million people in this area. It's not sparsely populated, okay? There are only about 11,000 Russians living in the Suwalki corridor. So on the surface, it looks like Russia doesn't really have an ethnic reason to be there, okay? However, it has argued, and I agree with this, that a potential Russian influence still exists in Suwalki and refers to Russia's attempts to attract Polish citizens to take part in militarized tournaments and other events. For example, the International Paintball Tournament Road to Victory, which in various years has also involved participants from Poland. Also, some Lithuanian radicals, most likely supported by Russia, have raised claims in social media that Lithuania should regain the Suwalki corridor from Poland. Lithuania obviously is not Polish. Even though the Suwalki borders Poland and Lithuania, having Lithuania take possession of it would be provocative to say the least. Now, there's another issue here, and that's whether the population of Kaliningrad would be exploited by Russia to initiate conflict in the region. I'm not sure that it would, even though these people are very, very smart and very, very hardworking, and they control a key piece of real estate. It's sort of like controlling the ingress and egress to a neighborhood. You control that ingress and egress, and everybody that lives in that neighborhood goes in and out of that neighborhood. They have to use that ingress and egress. It gives you a position of authority. So this position, even though there's only 11,000 Russians, does speak in favor of Russia and to diminish the potential costs of the conflict. For example, costs related to information warfare, justifying and searching support for Russia's aggressive actions in the region. It's only aggressive when it's reported by NATO and by globalists, global members of the global media empire. If you talk to Russians, if you talk to Putin, he is just making sure that NATO doesn't move additional hardware, missiles, howitzers, troop positions, barracks, closer to Russia to make it easier for them to attack him. In 2006, the SEZ, which is a news organization, this agreement with the news organization and all the authorities that are in the area, it was updated with new federal law. And it gives enterprises the right to export goods manufactured on the basis of imported components to Russia without paying duties and taxes. And this is important, but that was only up until April of 2016. And the right to export such products until 2031. These privileges have expired amid Western sanctions on Russia. And the end of the SEZ, this agreement, is expected to have a negative impact on at least 785 local companies that currently employ 24% of the local workforce. This is exactly what Virtual Joe has been mixed up in. Now, although Russia was not able to prevent NATO enlargement into Visegrad, its leaders have informed the West with unmistaken clarity that they view the Baltic membership in NATO as a red line that should not be crossed. and will consider any NATO expansion into that region as a direct threat to Russia's vital national interests. This is a very, very big deal. In fact, this is the whole Monty. This is what it's all about. Now, NATO has launched several initiatives, such as the establishment of the Baltic Air Policing Mission in 2004 to guard the airspace over the three nations. They have done joint exercises, which is very provocative. They've done investments into BaltNet, which is the Baltic Air Surveillance Network and Control System, and military exchanges. And Russia has constantly criticized these initiatives. You shouldn't be doing it. This is provocative. This is invasion. And as a response, Russian armed forces have conducted large-scale SNAP exercises. Also very intimidating. Flying airplanes right up to the border, flying helicopters at night, drone surveillance, stuff like that. They violated airspace and conducted Navy maneuvers close to its exclusive economic zones to demonstrate its significant capabilities when it comes to facing NATO. And NATO is afraid. They are afraid. To sum up, both the NATO alliance and Russia have different advantages and disadvantages with respect to a potential future escalation in the Suwalki corridor and the Kaliningrad region. The main weakness of NATO is its reliance on public opinion. It's not going well. It's not going well. Conceptually, at least, the alliance has much deeper pockets, even though it is an entirely different matter whether its superiority of resources can be realized in practice, because they could go broke so easily. So easily. They're just hanging on by a thread. The whole EU is. Russia enjoys a public affairs advantage. Okay? They're the underdog. They're the ones being approached. In that it must meet few demands to justify its military actions, which may allow it to outlast NATO in a conventional force brinkmanship scenario, despite having much fewer resources. They have fewer resources, but their resources are better. Unhappily, and despite the apparent irrationality of all the parties, the dynamics of the current relations between Russia and NATO, the alliance, clearly points toward escalation, and that's what's happening. Today, Russia is accusing the alliance of provocations and instability in the neighborhood regions of Russia. And I'm going to quote Putin right here, and you just tell me what you think. NATO is building up its military potential near our borders, and attempts are being made to halt integration processes with Russia's participation, provoke new and stir up old conflicts in the post-Soviet space, which Russia has nothing to do with now, and in regions neighboring on Russia. With all of the ensuing consequences, military and political instability, the growth of smuggling and crime, and acute humanitarian problems. Close quote. It seems that although both parties to the confrontation have sent each other costly signals, the current deterrent strategy, it ain't working. Conducting more and more complex military exercises and increasing military capabilities in the Suwalki corridor and the Kaliningrad region have not made the opponent more afraid. On the contrary, it's pissed him off. It has forced both sides to further mobilize their resources. Now, in my opinion, Russia is quite capable of not just sealing off the Baltic states in the bubble that covers air, sea, and land dimensions, but also of fiercely contesting other spaces of critical importance to military operations. They are clearly superior in the electromagnetic spectrum. They control the cyberspace, even control outer space, as Barack Obama diverted money away from space research to favor his building of ISIS. Putin fought against ISIS and kept them from unseating Bashar al-Assad. Right now, I think the military conflict between Russia and NATO alliance cannot be fully excluded as a possibility in the near future. Do I think it's the brink of world war? No. The global syndicate may choose to push Russia to the last line of escalation, or else force Russia to either surrender in economic terms or get involved in an actual conflict. I believe they have concluded that if they can push Russia into armed conflict in the Baltic region, it will mean the end of Vladimir Putin's political regime. I think that's what they think. Now, it is very obvious to the most casual observer that Putin will not take the initiative to find a common ground with the NATO alliance. Not going to do it. He's not motivated to do it. It's not his style to do it. He's a nationalist, and he's not going to surrender to the global syndicate. This means that the carrot has to be something very special for Russia. Something that would allow its elites to send a clear signal to their domestic audiences that Russian authority and influence are holding off the globalists. Now it's clear this type of solution is not going to be reached as long as Virtual Joe is in office. It's not going to happen because he's compromised by his decades of money laundering through the region. They control him, and he knows it. Putin knows it as well. A lasting peace between NATO and Putin requires the goodwill of the parties and a neutral platform for conducting strategic discussions. And I don't think there's any chance either side will scale down their military posturing as long as Virtual Joe is president. Just can't happen. Why? Because the memory of death in this region is too old. If Victoria Nuland or someone like her gets anywhere close to the planning table, Putin will wipe out NATO forces where they stand and let the chips fall as they may. The people of the world know the truth, and there is no possible way NATO leaders can get around that. They can't stop it, because as long as we're here and other podcasters are out there sharing the truth, it's not going to go away. On the other hand, if Virtual Joe is removed from power, and I'm not saying how that can happen, 25th Amendment, however it has to happen, and the crimes of the 2020 election are answered for with the arrests and the convictions of the powerful criminals currently in power, I believe the world peace is possible without a single soldier having to die. I'm serious. People are asking right now, who the hell is running America? Virtual Joe reads from index cards or a prompter. The person who writes those cards is the person running the country. That person is unelected, and you can't even speak to this person. But make no mistake, practically since Virtual Joe assumed office as President of the United States, the world has been wondering who the hell is really in charge. And at this point, everybody knows it ain't Joe. Now, many have surmised that it must be Biden's Vice President, Kamala Harris. I disagree with this. This is a monumentally unlikable and unintelligent individual. Harris was so unpopular that she was the first candidate to withdraw from the Democrat primary. Black men especially know what she is. In my humble opinion, the person or persons actually running this presidential puppet show want nothing to do with allowing a megalomaniac in waiting, heels up Harris, into the highest office in the land. She has zero powerful allies. And despite her success with trading sexual favors for powerful jobs, she's not that bright. No sex is good enough to become president. I'm sorry. And then there's the Wicked Witch of the West. Daniel Greenfield at Front Page Magazine believes that the most powerful elected official in the country isn't Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. It's Nancy Pelosi. I also disagree with this. Although Pelosi thinks she is the most powerful woman in the world, she may think she deserves to hold the pen instead of the mallet, but she's not running the show. I believe it's actually Susan Rice that's really running things as far as policy and the speech writing. She's wicked enough, she's smart enough, and she is, after all, an Obama loyalist and confidant. She appears highly intelligent, much more so than the current VP or the Wicked Witch, and likely has many more inside the Beltway allies than the other two combined. Hillary Clinton, Huma Abedin. She's proven herself to be more than capable and as devious as any on the left. You want an example? Here's one. Do you recall her handling of the Benghazi disaster in Libya? Rice was the point person on the anti-Islam YouTube video excuse for the attack on the faux embassy. She appeared on practically every network and news program in the nation, spouting the same propagandist lies that the death of our ambassador and others was due solely to a spontaneous uprising. And you know what? She didn't give a damn what people said about her. She laughed at the law. She grinned in the sight of blood. She lied unflinchingly in her sincerity and delivery. I mean, who better to take the reins of the Biden crime family than a serial liar? One of the pundits who promoted this theory early on is a little more than just talking head. How about former acting director of National Intelligence, Rick Grenell? You'd believe him, wouldn't you? He says it's Rice who's really calling all the shots in the new administration. Rice knows the State Department. She ran the national security portfolio and certainly has run the UN portfolio. So there's no question that she's running domestic and foreign policy. Then added that, in his opinion, it's Rice who is really the shadow president. I think the jury is still out, but I think the jury needs to convene because she's guilty. And by the way, she's one of my list of dirty 30 who should be arrested, tried, and convicted in a military tribunal for overthrowing the government of the United States of America. It's Easter Sunday. I have so appreciated you being here with me tonight. I wish you all the blessings I could possibly bestow, which are none except for my appreciation that you're here. And I hope that you've enjoyed tonight's program, that you learned something. If you didn't learn something, I'll try harder. But I need you to go out and look for the good in everyone you meet tomorrow. Help it to grow a little bit every day. And before long, you will have saved the planet. That's why we are here. That's why X Squared Radio was created in March of 2005. That's a long time ago, isn't it? We're over 17 years now. So have patience with me. Do what you can to help this message go viral. We have absolutely no control over that whatsoever. You sharing it with your friends and your family, telling other people about us is how we grow. It's the only way it happens. Nobody that has a podcast has any control over that whatsoever. So we try to do the best we can. We put a good message out. We leave it with good people like you. It's in your hands. It's in your heart. I just want you to remember that you are source. And everything you do will eventually affect the universe. Now go and do. This is X Squared Radio. My name is Brooks Agnew. Saying peace, Earth Explorers. We'll see you on Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your families, your community. Have faith. Don't fear. Love you all. See you on Wednesday.